Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the podcast. Jessica Donovan here, and I hope you're going really well. And if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, I hope you're surviving the winter. Down here in South Australia, it's cold. I'm a summer girl through and through, but I do really enjoy the four seasons. I wish winter was a bit shorter and summer was a bit longer, but I have lived elsewhere in the world. I've lived in the UK. I lived in London for a couple of years. I lived in Canada for a year. So I've experienced some really cold and long winters, particularly in London. Gosh, I just felt like the winter there went on and on forever. So I know that we are very lucky here in Australia. And yeah, I do enjoy the winter foods, the soups and the stews and the curries, and I love my winter walks. I'm very lucky where I live to be, close to the beach and close to a beautiful kind of scrub as well, which is gorgeous to walk around in the winter. I love getting rugged up and going for a walk. And it's one of the ways that I, keep my body warm when I'm feeling like I just can't warm up. Okay, so today I am going to be talking, we're continuing our series on immunity and winter infections, we've got 3 episodes prior to this one in this series. So we talked about fever, we talked about why kids get sick so often, and last week we talked about coughs and croup and natural treatments for those things. Today, I want to put a focus on kids with allergies and atopic conditions, allergic conditions, and some extra care that you might want to take if you've got kids with these conditions for keeping their immune system nice and strong through the winter. So within that atopic conditions umbrella is asthma, is eczema, is food allergies and environmental allergies, and hay fever. So if your kids struggle with any of those or have been diagnosed with any of those things, these are all issues with the immune system. They're conditions that affect the immune system, or a dysregulation in the immune system is what leads to these conditions and the symptoms that go along with these conditions. So there are a couple of reasons why kids with allergies and atopic conditions, and including asthma, are more prone to winter infections. And by understanding why they get sick more easily, we can start to address the underlying issues and support their immune system naturally. So when a child has an allergy, or they have asthma or eczema or hay fever, their immune system is dysfunctional, if you like. So the immune system is overactive. It's reacting to things that are normally harmless to the body. All of these conditions have an element of that happening. So that could be reacting to a food, or to dust, or to pet dander, or to pollen, or to other environmental triggers. And the immune system only has so much energy or fuel to keep it running. And if a lot of that energy is going into the overdrive, the overactivity of the immune system, there is less energy for the part of the system that fights off infection. A well-powered immune system will often kick infections before symptoms even occur. But for kids with allergies, asthma, atopic conditions, there isn't enough energy to keep it at peak. So they often, get sick more often than other kids. And another reason that allergies and atopic conditions often these kids often get sick more often is because they often come with a breakdown of physical barriers. So when a child has a food allergy or intolerance, there are typically issues with the gut lining. And if the gut becomes leaky or there's that intestinal permeability, as it's sometimes called, germs can easily come from the gut into the bloodstream. So it can be sort of easier for that infection to occur. And this applies to other physical barriers as well. So with eczema, there's a breakdown of the skin barrier. And as the skin is inflamed, there's a greater risk of infection. With asthma, there's issues with the respiratory barriers. And so that can leave kids vulnerable to lung infections and those sorts of things more than other kids. So the combination of less power or less energy for the protective side of the immune system, combined with breakdown of barriers, is why kids with allergies and atopic conditions can be more prone to illness. And I'm sure if you've got a child that fits into this category, many of you might notice that they do tend to get sick more often than friends that might not have allergies or atopic conditions. So let's think about or talk about 3 ways that we can support immunity in kids with allergies. When it comes to immunity, there's lots of things that we can do to support the immune system naturally. But if you have a child with allergies or atopic conditions, you might just want to take that up a notch, take some extra steps to keep them healthy. And here's what I would recommend. First of all, we want to encourage a healthy, diverse gut microbiome. So that beautiful, diverse gut microbiome is really important when it comes to allergies and atopic conditions and immune defense. The more diverse the bacteria in the gut, so the more different strains of healthy bacteria we have in the gut microbiome, the more kids are protected against both allergies and germs. So I've talked about this before on the podcast, but just a little reminder, or for those of you who haven't heard it before, compared to back in the hunter-gatherer days, our microbiome diversity is half of what it used to be. That's a huge decline. And, there's lots of factors that are involved in that decline of diversity, but it's really the combination of our Western diet and lifestyle factors that has depleted the microbes in the gut. The food we're eating, the environment we're living in, the lifestyle we're leading, all have a part to play in that decline of the microbiome diversity. So when it comes to kids with atopic and allergic conditions, supporting gut health is this is always essential for kids, but it's twice as essential, if you like, because that diversity within the gut microbiome has been shown to be protective against allergies, but also protective against infections. And a healthy, diverse gut will not only bolster their defenses against infections, it can also help to balance out the overactive side of the immune system that is reacting to things that it shouldn't be. So optimizing gut health and promoting diversity can be done in so many different ways. One of the things that we can do is increase exposure to everyday microbes. So we want to be making sure that our kids are playing outside or they're in an outdoor environment regularly. Pets are another good source of everyday microbes. We know from research that having a pet helps to improve microbiome diversity, and also spending more time outside. We know that kids that grow up on farms have a higher microbiome diversity. So getting our kids outside, is really important. It might be a little bit harder in the winter, but it's really important for that exposure to everyday microbes. We also want to be careful not to be over sanitizing and, obsessed with hygiene too much within our homes, because when we are sanitizing everything, which obviously has been, a big focus over the last couple of years, it's reducing our kids' exposure to those everyday microbes that are really important for developing a healthy immune system and training an immune system to know what is okay and what it needs to kind of fight against. So that exposure to microbes is really important. Then we can also replenish or, make sure we're getting in as much of that good bacteria into our kids' bodies as possible. So we can use things like fermented foods, we can use probiotic supplements, and these are really great ideas for kids with atopic conditions, asthma, eczema, hayfever, allergies. If you find that your kids' symptoms get worse with fermented foods or probiotics, that could mean that there's a bit of an issue with histamine intolerance. And so if this is happening, I would highly recommend seeking some professional help from a naturopath, and we can definitely help you with those sorts of things here at Natural Super Kids. And I do also want to just note, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but not all probiotics are created equal. So different strains of probiotics have different benefits. And when it comes to allergies and atopic conditions, one of my favorite strains to use is the Lactobacillus rhamnosus, or LGG. It helps to promote diversity within the gut, and research has shown that it improves atopic conditions such as eczema and asthma. So if you're looking for a probiotic, again, it's always a good idea to get some professional help. But if you look for a probiotic supplement with the Lactobacillus rhamnosus, LGG, in it, then, that's a really great strain to be using. And then don't forget the fermented foods, things like sauerkraut and coconut kefir and kombucha and yogurt. Of course, not all kids will love these first up, but they are an acquired taste, and keep trying different recipes. It's a really good way to build up that diversity, is get more fermented foods into our kids' diets. And then we want to feed that good bacteria as well. So once we're getting that regular, the probiotics and the fermented foods, we want to make sure there's a really good healthy food source for that bacteria to be thriving within our kids' digestive system. So this includes things like prebiotic fibers, which we can get through lots of different vegetables and spices and fruits. So just upping the fruit and vegetable intake, as well as things like whole grains. Oats are a great source of prebiotic fibers. Lentils and chickpeas are great sources as well. We want to make sure that we're getting lots of that whole food goodness, the fiber particularly, into our kids' digestive systems, or into their mouths, so that we're feeding that healthy bacteria. So looking after the gut is really important when your kids have allergies, and it's also a really great thing you can do for their immune system as well. The next thing we want to be thinking about is vitamin D levels. So important for immunity in general. We need good amounts of vitamin D in the winter to be fighting off the germs. So vitamin D is important for that defensive side of the immune system. But it's kind of like we don't get exposure to vitamin D as much in the winter because the sun isn't as potent, and we tend to spend less time outside. So it's another reason to get your kids outside. But vitamin D, when it comes to allergies and atopic conditions, vitamin D boosts a type of immune cells known as the Tregs. So the Tregs modulate the immune system and maintain tolerance levels. So this prevents immune imbalances such as allergies and also autoimmune conditions. Vitamin D is super important with anyone with any issue with their immune system, whether it's atopic conditions or, as I said, autoimmune conditions. Another positive side effect of vitamin D is that it is really important for the diversity of gut flora. So vitamin D actually increases microbiome diversity. Isn't that amazing? And many studies have linked vitamin D with allergies in Australia, studies have shown that states with weaker sunlight, such as Victoria and South Australia, have higher levels of allergic conditions compared to states closer to the equator, such as Queensland. Isn't that interesting as well? And the only way to know whether our kids have adequate vitamin D levels is through a blood test. And it is fairly easy to test vitamin D within the blood. It's not always easy to get the blood out of a child to test that, but so that might not be necessary, but it is a really, if your child is having ongoing immune issues and they've got atopic conditions, it might be a good idea to get their vitamin D levels checked. So we want to be getting our kids to play outside, to get more exposure to sunlight. And in the winter, we want to make sure that the kids are getting outside in the middle of the day when the sun is at its highest. And of course, keeping skin covered with clothing and even sunscreen does reduce the amount of vitamin D that we will be making from that sunlight exposure. So we want to of course, we want to use sunscreen when we need to, but when the UV index is below 3, we want to be rethinking sunscreen. And when we are outside, and this goes for us as well, like in those cold days, try and roll up your sleeves as you're going for a walk, or if you're out in the back garden, take your shoes off, expose as much skin as possible through the winter to get as much of that vitamin D from sunshine as possible. And then, of course, we can think about supplementation as well. So when it comes to a vitamin D supplement, we want to be looking for vitamin D3. You can get vitamin D in liquid form, capsule form, spray form. It is always a really good idea to get some professional help in terms of dose, and to get access to good quality supplements. But, most adults can pretty safely take 1,000 IU a day, and kids, depending on their age, could take 250 to 500 IU a day, is what I would recommend. But it is always good to get some specific recommendations from a naturopath. As I said earlier, we do offer consultations, and you can even have an express consultation. You can book that via our website, where you can just get a sort of a quick answer to your question and get access to good quality practitioner only supplements as well. So we've talked about that gut microbiome. We've talked about vitamin D. The final thing I would recommend is to add in some bonus immune support for kids with allergies and atopic conditions. So things like nutrients and herbs and homeopathics can be great. Even chiropractic adjustments, essential oils, all these things can have benefits. Now, I do go into more detail on immune support and my 3 favorite ways to boost your kids' immune system to keep them healthy through the winter and avoid those infections in my free masterclass. So if you're interested in learning more about that, which I would highly recommend, you can find the free masterclass link in the show notes. But when it comes to kids with allergies, one of my favorite naturopathic medicines is medicinal mushrooms. So medicinal mushrooms are great for nourishing and strengthening the immune system. They have antiviral and antimicrobial actions, but then they're also really great for dampening down that overactive allergic side of the immune system. So they can work brilliantly for kids with asthma and atopic conditions. I use a blend, like it's a powdered blend that includes reishi, shiitake, and Coriolis. But again, it is best to get some specific support and get access to the good stuff through a naturopath or a nutritionist. Don't just pick something up from the pharmacy or health food store. But the medicinal mushrooms can be really effective, particularly for kids with those atopic conditions, as I said. So I hope that's given you a really good place to start and some good practical ideas for your kids with allergies, and, on ways to keep them healthy through the winter. Let me know if this was helpful. I'd love to hear from you. One of the best ways to connect with me is through Instagram. You can look us up at Natural Super Kids. We share lots of inspiring posts and complimentary posts to what we talk about on the podcast over on Instagram as well. So send me a message and let me know how you enjoyed this episode. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.